Imagine you're boxing with someone and you take this person's punches, and what you do, you don't punch back, you punch yourself. You're helping this person to punch yourself. That's exactly what some white people do in the West. They engage into this strange self-hatred. They actually unite with those who hate them, and for some reason they hate themselves for something they cannot change, for their own skin color. What are you without your cultural identity, your religious identity, your country, and your ethnicity? What exactly are you without all those factors? You're nothing. And if you hate all of it, what exactly is your goal? Your skin color doesn't determine your success or your failure. Actually, if you study economics and sociology, you would understand that your family determine your success, because your family, like for example, if you two-parent household and your parents build wealth for you and force you to study, help you with the study, you'll become much more successful than, for example, people with divorced parents. And skin color in this case is irrelevant. What relevant is your nourishment inside the family, is how much your parents helped you, how much your parents provide you with the right environment for education. And if you just from a broken family and then you go to the world, you suddenly realize there's no white privilege. Actually, there's no privilege at all unless you have money. There's money privilege, yes, but there's no other privilege but money privilege. And suddenly you start hating the world. You feel yourself with resentfulness. And another thing, like if you feel yourself with resentfulness, how you can make your resentfulness noble? How you can make your resentment feel much more noble, feel much more great? Then you decide, what if I'm going to hate myself? What if I'm going to hate my own skin color? What if I'm going to hate the entire group of people that I belong to? Create this noble sacrifice. And I think that's what a lot of white people do right now in the West. They create this noble sacrifice of themselves and their nation. They kind of like, they vilify themselves so badly and their people and their culture and their history that there's no other choices but to sacrifice the entire country and give it to other people who doesn't look like us, people who don't have the same culture, the same religion, nothing that unite us. But it's so dangerous, because if you dehumanize yourself based on your skin color, then you will unite with someone who has the same idea of dehumanization of you based on your skin color. And the end goal for both of you is your own destruction. And I think it comes from the idea of sacrifice, because you have kind of unity between two entities within you, your biological entity and your conscious entity, your observer entity. And what you do, you have to be very careful, because proper sacrifice demands from you to improve your consciousness, improve your observer, because through your observer you write your story, since you are able to perceive yourself through your observer, through the third person perspective. From the biological point of view, you as a biology, you just need comfort, you just need for example, procreation and calorie consumption. You're pretty primitive from this side. And if you abandon your observer, if you abandon completely your consciousness, if you abandon to perceive yourself as a human being and more perceive yourself as an animal, since you drowned in the wrong idea of freedom, for example, because usually people who propagate this self-hatred are progressive liberals, and most of them are atheists. And atheists, they don't believe in anything, they believe in their own biology. Why? Because that's what they worship. They believe their own biology. And once you believe in your own biology, your end goal is your own biology. In some sense, you don't know what mine is. Everything is accident. Love is just a chemical reaction, and you can explain everything through some scientific words. You're just a biology, you just live to die, and your life makes no sense. From the perspective of atheists, your life makes no sense. Because you have no God, you have no structure. How you can have structure if you're atheist? On what your internal structure based on? Because for atheism, there's no structure. There's just accident of birth, an accident of existence, and then accident of death. It's in religious point of view, from religious point of view, you have to build such a structure, this internal structure that leads you to God, this constant self-discovery, this constant search for meaning. But it's only possible if you have faith in God, if you have faith in something bigger than you, something that much more important than you, something that matters more than you do. But when you're atheist, when you're progressive atheist, when you don't believe in none of that nonsense, you don't have structure, you don't build no structure, you live in the present almost like an animal. That's why animals, they are live in the present. Animals, they don't have notion of time. It seems to me that a lot of people try to live the same way. They just abandon notion of time, because if you abandon notion of time, you forget about death, and if you forget about death, nothing matters. And that's what, and they adopt this guilt, this white guilt, because they need to have this white guilt to give their life meaning, even in some sense perverse religious meaning. Since they abandoned God, since they abandoned Christianity, they created their own idea of God, their own idea of Christianity, this perversive idea of white guilt, where they have to sacrifice themselves to their own enemies. Like Jesus says, love your own enemy. In this case, they welcome the enemy who hate them for who they are, who hate their culture, who hate their religion, who hate their countries. And they give those enemies the higher positions in the government. They let them rule over themselves. And in some sense, that's their sacrifice that they're desperate for. My point is, to be able to resolve this issue, you have to accept responsibility for who you are. Because self-hatred doesn't give you anything. You're not responsible for what happened 100 years ago. And every country has historical injustices. Every country has atrocities. Every country. And you're not responsible for what happened 100 years ago. You're not even responsible for your parents, because you're not responsible for other human being unless it's your children and while they're small. Because you're only responsible for your own self as an individual. You're responsible for who you are, for your own steps, for your own directions, for your own words. And once you learn this idea of individualism, that's supposed to be in America dominant idea of individual, where everyone responsible for their own actions, for their own words, then maybe we can turn this around. But once you understand this idea of individual, you suddenly would understand it's only possible to be individual if you have structure in your life. And suddenly, if you have structure in your life, you would discover the structure leads to God. Because it leads up. And suddenly you realize the structure is impossible if you don't have faith in impossible. Because God is the faith to impossible, to believe impossible right in front of you. Because you have to start with something. You have to walk toward something. If you think death is the end of you and nothing matters after, what's the point to build this structure? Just enjoy your biology until you cannot enjoy your biology. But if you believe there's something more important than you are, then your individualism makes sense, because your individualism based on the responsibility that you take for yourself, for your cultural, religious identity, for the love of your country, for your family, and you try to improve the world. Why? Because that's what structure demands from you. But if you don't believe in this, if you don't care about this, if you think everything is accidental, like your life, like your death, of course you would feel with resentment. And to make this resentment more noble, you name it self-hatred, you name it white guilt, and you start welcoming enemies from other countries who have the same hate as you do toward you, as you have toward yourself. My point is, You have to learn to take responsibility. And there's nothing easy in this life. Nothing good comes easy. Only bad things comes easy, but they make life so complicated. Isn't it ironic? Good things doesn't come easy. You have to work hard to have good things, but once you get them, there's such an ease within yourself, upon your soul. But bad things, they come easy, but they make your life so complicated, so unbearable, and so exhausting that you don't want to live any longer. Be careful what you wish for, and be careful with self-hatred, because we have already enough hatred from other people than to have self-hatred voluntarily upon yourself.